Let's talk about the 2026 Met Gala. Every year on the first Monday in May, famous faces from all over the globe meet in one place, the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York City. But they aren't there to look at some old statues, or at least that isn't the only reason. They're there to attend what is colloquially referred to as the Met Gala, aka fashion's biggest night. Established in 1948, it began as a simple dinner to celebrate the Costume Institute's annual exhibit. But as the years have passed, the Met Gala has become a more elaborate affair, turning into a fashion show that features some of the most recognizable celebrities in the world. Although the Met Gala has been around for nearly 8 decades now, it's only become a worldwide phenomenon in the last 15 years or so. And as it's become more and more popular, so have the criticisms lobbied against it. And if I see one more watching from District 12 Hunger Games comparisons, I'm gonna lose it. What a lot of people fail to realize is that unlike the rest of the Metropolitan Museum, the Costume Institute has to raise its own funding, and the Met Gala is one of its biggest moneymakers, not only supporting the creation of the exhibit, but the staff, costume conservation, and the maintenance of its archive. So the next time you say, the Met Gala doesn't matter, just remember that you're telling hundreds of people that their job is unimportant. The theme of this year's exhibit is costume art, which is described by curator Andrew Bolton as, quote, the centrality of the dressed body in the museum's vast collection and the indivisible connection between our bodies and the clothes we wear. The exhibit features depictions of the human form throughout history and is organized into a series of thematic body types, from the naked body to the pregnant body to the anatomical body, with the mannequins highlighting how fashion is unique in the realm of art as it's something humans actually live in. If you couldn't tell, the exhibit's intention is to highlight the artistic merit of clothing, something that has been hotly debated for centuries. I'm sure you've probably heard someone say, oh, it's just shoes, what's the big deal, as if it's a frivolous thing that all of us don't own. But with an entire wing of the Metropolitan Museum now being dedicated to the Costume Institute, it hasn't been uncommon to hear people question whether or not these pieces deserve to be put in a museum. Now, while most formal events just let you wear black tie, the Met Gala typically suggests a dress code that's inspired by the exhibit. In this case, fashion is art, encouraging attendees to consider the ways that designers use the body as a blank canvas. I want to make it clear that when I'm talking about the outfits at the Met Gala, there's levels to it. There are some that are technically on theme, whose execution I'm just not sold on. Or there are outfits completely unrelated to the dress code that I just think look nice. Or there are looks so boring that I think the guest would have been better staying at home. Most importantly, what I might be looking for in an outfit might not be the same as what you're looking for. So don't get too worked up if I happen to dislike something that you loved. Also, keep in mind that unless I mention someone by name, I'm speaking about the red carpet in general terms. A lot of attendees seem to take inspiration from the title of the dress code, but not so much the prompt itself, resulting in a ton of references to different paintings and sculptures. Although technically off base, I can still appreciate the effort, especially when it's actually thought out. For example, Anne Hathaway wore a Michael Kors dress inspired by Grecian urns, which the Metropolitan Museum has plenty of in their collection, and it physically turned her into a piece of art. I also liked how it seemed to be referencing her role in Christopher Nolan's upcoming Odyssey movie. I guess she's starting the method dressing early. Some other looks that I liked that leaned into the art aspect, but less so the body as a blank canvas thing, were Hunter Schafer's Prada number, inspired by Gustav Klimt's painting Mata Primavera, Alexa Chung's take on Claude Monet's Water Lilies by Dior, Amy Sherald's Tom Brown ensemble that recreated one of her own paintings, and Sabrina Carpenter's Dior dress, which was made out of film negatives from the 1954 film Sabrina, and also seemed to be inspired by the artwork Le Cinéma Cochon. One look that I really liked that the average person probably won't is Cardi B's Marc Jacobs dress, which features lumpy blobs and anatomical renderings. It's inspired by Hans Bellmer's surreal sculptures, making her one of the few people to lean into the actual theme of the exhibit. And sure, it isn't exactly pretty, but who says art has to be pretty? Yu Chi Lyra Kuo was another person inspired by a sculpture, wearing a custom Jean-Paul Gaultier dress that paid homage to the winged victory of Samothrace, which is believed to have been made in 190 BC, making it more than 2,000 years old. There were a lot of vague references to ancient Greek artwork, architecture, and clothing at this year's Met Gala, with plenty of people going the draped toga route, so I really appreciate that hers went in a more structured direction. The only thing that would have made it better is if it had some of the grime that the original does, just to add a bit more depth and detail. Robert I was kind of the hero of the night, with several of the most artistic looks coming from his atelier. This was a really great full circle moment, considering the Through the Flesh dress from his Fall/Winter 2024 collection was actually featured in the exhibit. I think the reason his looks worked so well is because they have the right balance of artistic reference and body experimentation, with all of his silhouettes featuring a lot of variation. Honestly, I wish Beyoncé had worn the dress he'd designed for her later on in the evening on the actual red carpet, because the skeleton dress just wasn't doing it for me. Heidi Klum had one of the most talked about outfits of the entire evening, showing up as a living, breathing statue. Created by makeup artist Mike Marino, Klum wouldn't have looked out of place inside of the exhibit, and although it's absolutely terrifying, I think the look does a great job of highlighting the underrated artistry of makeup. It seems more people interpreted the dress code as fashion as art instead of fashion is art, and I was honestly surprised that more people didn't lean into the physical medium, showing up with a picture frame around their head or dripping in paint. However, the few people that did, like Chase Infinity, Paloma Elsesser, and Emma Chamberlain, immediately stood out, not only because of how it related to the dress code, but for the much-needed color and texture it added to the event. In fact, Emma Chamberlain's custom Mugler number was one of my favorites of the night. They just nailed it from head to toe, and it's really remarkable to see how far she's come in the last 6 years as a Met Gala correspondent. Some people had more questionable artistic references, but as long as the end result looks interesting, I can live with whatever loose relation it has to the theme. That goes for Gwendolyn Christie, Janelle Monáe, Sam Smith, and Odetta Kesh, although I can admit that I'm also just a sucker for that silhouette. While you could make the argument that a naked dress would fulfill the body as a blank canvas requirement, there's such an overdone part of the Met Gala at this point that just seeing one tends to annoy me. Gigi Hadid and Kate Moss were the most egregious offenders this year, basically showing up in lingerie and calling it a day. At least Zoe Kravitz's sheer dress had a fun shape to it. I did like the sort of state of undress outfits, since it was a clever acknowledgement of both the ubiquity of clothing in the human existence and created a silhouette that was a little unusual. Kylie Jenner's Schiaparelli number is probably my favorite, but Kendall's Zac Posen look could have been a top contender if she'd kept the wings on the whole time. This was the first year that every member of Blackpink was invited to the Met Gala, and it's so interesting how their outfit choices reflect their personal style philosophies. I probably like Lisa's Robert I number the best, but only when it's fully accessorized. Otherwise, Jisoo's Dior takes the cake. Honestly, a lot of people played it safe. Too safe if you ask me. And even if there was some loose reference to a work of art, it just wound up looking like they were wearing a run-of-the-mill gown. Like, we know you're pretty, it's kind of your job, so why not take some risks on the one night a year where it matters? I'm not saying they had to go full camp, that's not what the dress code was asking for, but a white column dress just feels like they didn't even try. But with that said, there were some dresses that I thought were beautiful, even if their relation to the theme was non-existent, like Odessa Azion in Valentino, Daisy Edgar-Jones in Alexander McQueen, Blake Lively in Versace, and Chase Sui Wonders, also in McQueen. There were only a couple of outfits that I found actively bad, where I actually thought they made the person wearing them look worse, and I hate to say it, but that included Rihanna, who looked like a meteor had fallen onto her. As per usual, the men let me down this year, with most going for some iteration of a plain black suit. The most interesting of the night was probably Karan Johar, which was inspired by the works of Raja Ravi Varma. But overall, I just found myself desperate for any semblance of color and fun. So for that, I have to give props to Coleman Domingo, A$AP Rocky, and Jeremy Pope, even if there are some things that I'd still change about their looks. Now, I hate to pit two queens against each other, but I know people will ask about the heated rivalry boys, and I have to say I was disappointed by both. Connor Story's Saint Laurent number was at least well-tailored, but it was so boring. Hudson Williams' look had potential, but the proportions were all wrong for him, with the jacket looking too small and the pants way too big. Overall, I wasn't expecting people to take the art part of the dress code so literally, not to mention with such half-hearted references. The Met Gala can always be hit or miss, and the 2026 edition definitely feels like a miss to me, and I can probably count on one hand the number of looks I'll actually remember in 24 hours. Speaking of disappointments, the 2026 Met Gala has been one of the more controversial editions in recent history, and not because of the outfits. This all has to do with Jeff Bezos and his new wife becoming sponsors and honorary co-chairs of the event, which even led to calls for a boycott. Now, I hate to come to the defense of a billionaire, especially one with such little concern for the working class as Jeff Bezos, but a lot of the outrage honestly comes across as performative, just another thing for people on the internet to act holier than thou about. I mean, how many of you use Amazon Prime, shop at Whole Foods, read the Washington Post, have watched a Twitch stream, or bought a pair of shoes from Zappos? Because if so, you've put money into Jeff Bezos' pocket. And I would never dream of blaming you for that. It's almost impossible nowadays to partake in anything that isn't linked to an oligarch. Sad, but true. With Donald Trump's administration actively eliminating federal funding for the arts, isn't it important to keep the museums we still have up and running? In an ideal world, we wouldn't have a billionaire sponsoring the Met Gala, because instead, it would be funded by taxes that the 1% paid. I mean, just look at when FDR raised the tax rates of the filthy rich back in the 1930s, and all of the public programs and infrastructure we benefited from as a result. But unfortunately, as long as we have a cash register wrapped in flesh as a president, that's never going to happen. And personally, I'd rather Bezos put $10 million towards the arts than something else. Honestly, Anna Wintour should have made him pay more. He can afford it. I also think it's important to recognize that this isn't the first time a billionaire has sponsored the Met Gala. For example, back in 2018, the much-beloved Heavenly Bodies theme had Steven Schwartzman as a co-chair, another billionaire who was a longtime friend and advisor of Donald Trump's. Countless corporations have sprung for the sponsor title, like Yahoo, Apple, Instagram, and yes, even Amazon back in 2012. Now, I do understand where the anger comes from. As economic inequality gets more severe and the rest of us are struggling to pay our bills, a night of lavish excess can come across as pretty tone deaf. But keep in mind that a lot of the attendees are closer to having our net worth than they are to having Jeff Bezos's. The Metropolitan Museum brings art, history, and culture to millions of New Yorkers, not to mention tourists, and the Costume Institute is no small part of that. With over 35,000 pieces spanning 600 years of human history, it's one of the most comprehensive collections of clothing and accessories in the entire world. Every gown, every suit, every accessory documents a part of human existence. If you can understand why the Mona Lisa belongs in a museum, then a dress worn by Leonardo da Vinci's next-door neighbor deserves your respect too. Clothing is something that each of us engages with every single day. That is exactly what this year's exhibit was about. And whether or not the celebrities showed up in outfits I liked, their attendance ensured that the Costume Institute gets to stay open for another year. Who had your favorite and least favorite look at the 2026 Met Gala? That's it for this video. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you soon. Bye!